Can your mole make the best mountains, or will they topple as they get too tall? Take on the other players to see who can control the most mountains and win the title of the top tunneler.
Welcome back to Kids Planning. I'm Peyton and this is Jared, and today we're going to teach you how to play the 2 to 4 player game Mountains Out of Molehills from the app who helped sponsor this video.
In Mountains Out of Molehills, each player controls a mole who will be digging tunnels on the bottom layer of the board and making mountains on the top layer. The player who controls the most mountains at the end of the game wins.
To set up the game, each player takes a mole and all of their pieces, then take the King of the Hill tokens for your player count. So for 2 players, we take 1 and 2 and give 1 randomly to each player. Put the box in the middle of the table, and put the underground board in the box on top of the organizer tray. For 2 players, you use the smaller side of the board, and for 3 to 4 players, you use the full side of the board. Then put the 4 legs in the corners of the bottom box, and put the above ground board on top, using the same board size that you used on the bottom board.
In this video, we'll be removing the top board sometimes so you can see what we're doing, but when you actually play, you won't do that.
Next, each player picks an empty corner to place their mole in. Your mole's nose shows which way it's going to go, and you can start your mole out going any direction. So this mole goes this way, and this mole goes this way.
Then each player puts 1 molehill piece on the above ground space directly above their mole. Shuffle the movement cards and put them in a face-down pile. Then put the rock token and rock dice near the board and pick somebody to keep score and give them the score pad.
The game is played over 6 rounds. Each round has 3 parts: card drafting, planning and movement, and scoring.
In the drafting phase, lay out 5 cards for each player face up in the middle of the table. Drafting is done in order based on the King of the Hill token, so in a 2-player game, it will just go back and forth. But in a 3 or 4-player game, it may not be in the order that players are seated. Starting with the first player and going in the order of the King of the Hill tokens, players will take turns drafting a total of 4 movement cards. There should be 1 card per player left over. Just discard those cards.
Next is the planning and movement phase.
Since moles can't see well, they have to plan out their movements in advance. During planning, each player will stack their movement cards face down in the order they want to use them. You'll be using them from top to bottom of the face down stack, and you can't change them or look at them again once planning is over, so pay attention.
Once everyone has their cards organized, it's time for movement.
In turn order, based on the King of the Hill tokens, each player reveals and resolves their top card, then repeat until everyone has resolved all 4 of their movement cards.
Now let's talk about how movement works.
We're going to show you everything in the below ground board first, then talk about what happens above ground. The back of the rulebook tells you exactly what each card does, but for the most part, they make you move a certain number of spaces, and some cards let you turn too.
And remember, your mole's nose shows the direction of movement.
So the first thing I'm going to do is move forward 3. So 1, 2, 3. And now it's Peyton's turn.
So my first move is move forward 3. 1, 2, 3.
And then my next card is turn around and move forward 1.
You're never allowed to move outside the edge of the board.
And if you ever have a card that can't be fully resolved, just do what you can and ignore the rest. So if I was right here and I gotta move forward 3, then I would move 1, 2, and then ignore that last movement because I ran into a wall.
Moles are polite, so they wait their turn. So if you run into another mole, you stop and ignore all the other actions on your card.
If a player plays a rock card, they get to place or move the rock token onto any empty space on the underground board. Then they roll the rock die and place it on the token. The token and the dice stay where they are until another rock card is played.
Running into a rock gets you disoriented.
So if you're ever supposed to move into a space with the rock token, replace that movement with a turn in the direction of the dice. Then finish any remaining movement on the card.
So if I was right here and I had to move forward 3, I would do 1, and then as my second action, I would turn around since that's what the dice says. And my third movement would move me forward 1 more time. And that's all there is to moving underground, but all that movement makes things happen above ground.
Every time you move onto a new space underground, you add a molehill to the space directly above you. So when I did my first move forward 3, I moved forward 3, and then I added a molehill to every new space that I moved onto. Like that.
Rotation doesn't add molehills, only moving onto a new space does.
And molehills are built from the bottom up. So if you move onto a space that already has molehills on it, add yours to the bottom of the stack that's already there.
So if my mole moved onto this space, then I would put my molehill under this one, not on top of it.
If you're ever out of molehills, you can take one of your own from the top of another molehill. If you don't have enough that are on top of other molehills, or you don't want to take any of those off, just finish your movement without placing molehills. Now, molehills can get too tall. The maximum height increases as you play new rounds, and it's shown on the score pad.
If a molehill ever gets too tall, it topples.
When you topple a molehill, pick the direction you want to topple, then spread the pieces, 1 per space in that direction. You'll leave the bottom piece where it is, and then spread the pieces from bottom to top. but new pieces go on top of existing molehills. So if I move here, then I add my piece to the bottom of this, and if the maximum was 4, then now this one is 5, so it topples. So I leave that bottom one there, and then topple this one to here, this one to here, this one to here, and then this one goes off the board. If a topple ever reaches the edge of the board and there's pieces left, those go back to the owner's supply. Sometimes, movement will trigger multiple topples, and topples can also trigger other topples by making other molehills too tall. If that ever happens, completely finish the first topple, then resolve any topples that were created by that topple, then resolve other topples that happen because of additional movement. So from this topple that I did earlier, it made this molehill too tall, so I have to resolve this topple, but this time I'm going to resolve it going this way. So I leave the bottom molehill there, and then I put this one here, this one here, this one here, and then this one went off the board, so that goes to Peyton.
Once everyone's done resolving their movement, it's time to score the round.
Each player scores points for the mountains they control, and since moles are underground, mountains are controlled from the bottom, not the top. So players score any mountain where they have the bottom piece, regardless of what other colors are in it. Players earn 1 point for each piece of any color in every mountain they control. So on this row, I control this one, so I get 1 point, and then Peyton controls this one, so he gets 1, 2, 3, 4 points, and then he gets 1 point for here, and I get 4 points for this one.
Don't remove any mountains while you're scoring, because you're going to keep building onto those through the game.
After scoring is finished, it's time to set up for the next round. First, players select the King of the Hill tokens for the next round. The player with the most pieces on top of mountains picks first, and they can pick any number they want. Then, the player with the second most picks, and so on. If there's a tie, whoever went earlier in the current round goes first. Then players discard all of their used movement cards and draft cards for the next round.
And after the 6th round, everyone tallies up their score from the whole game, and whoever has the highest score at the end of the game wins.
If there's a tie, the player with the most 5-piece mountains wins. And if there's still a tie, check 4-piece, 3-piece, 2-piece, and 1-piece mountains until you find a winner. If you're still tied, you'll just have to share the victory.
And that's Mountains Out of Molehills. Thank you so much for watching.
And be sure to like and subscribe, and check out some of our other videos too.
See you later. Bye!